G'day groovers, rockers and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with legendary Newcastle musician Rick Pointon. This is the second instalment in our Newcastle Vinyl Vibes series. In this 8-part Newcastle series, I'm talking with a range of local rockers important to the Newcastle music story. Rick is best known for his time in the local 1970s band Benny and the Jets. However, in this episode, Rick and I discuss his musical work throughout the 1960s. Rick joined his first band, the Mystics, in late 1963 during the instrumental music craze of the early 60s. By the time the Beatles stepped onto Aussie shores in 1964, Rick had joined another local group, the Mystery Men. Possibly Rick's greatest success during the 1960s was his time in the Second Thoughts. While a part of the Second Thoughts, Rick had a #1 single locally in Newcastle. This single was recorded and produced by early Bee Gees producer Nat Kipner. After the Second Thoughts, Rick would form Bittersweet in 1969, the band which he would stay with for the remainder of the 1960s. More recently, Rick has written a book called Hey Rock and Roll, which reflects on his time in music and the Newcastle scene of the 60s and 70s. G'day Rick, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Lovely to be here.
Wanted to start around early 1963 when you got your first guitar, a second-hand guide tone, and I just kind of wanted to know, what was it like playing that first guitar of yours?
It was great, but I tell you what, I've never seen one since. Probably should have kept it. It was a real cheapo because it's all I could afford. Mum and Dad never really had the money to buy me a guitar when I was a kid, so I bought that when I got my first job at 15. Looking back, it probably wasn't real good. I've tried to, just out of curiosity, find one somewhere just to see but I've never seen one since, but it would have been a cheapo. It was all new and no one knew much about it. No one had ever heard of Vox and Marshall and whatever, and it's all I could afford. A little amplifier and... it's all you needed for home. And then, when you get in a band, you get a bit bigger amplifier.
Before you joined the Mystics, you played with a few mates, Ray Austin, Stan Spike and Johnny Thorsten. Take me through those early days, because that was the first time you were kind of playing with other people.
Yeah, Stan Spink, yeah. It was the same old story. You just bump into friends and, I'm learning guitar too, and I'm going to learn the drums. And so we lived on the golf course at Argenton, right opposite where the Mines Rescue Station is. There used to be an old house there. It's long gone now. It was the previous clubhouse, but it was a real old dilapidated house. And my dad was the greenkeeper, so we got to use that house. And right behind the house was a huge shed where all the tractors and everything was kept in the shed. So Dad said, you guys can practice in the shed. So it was just a matter of, whoever could play anything, really. Mm-hmm. But we started off, as I said in the book, we started off playing everyone played instrumentals. You didn't really do vocals. And we started off learning the Denver Men's #1 hit, Surfside. And that's pretty slow. There's really not much to it. It was funny. Dad came in one night and he said, I've heard from Mr. Stevenson, who's across the second fairway. He lived on that corner, I said, oh yeah. He said, to tell you, he thinks you guys have got that now. So he was sitting in his lounge room at home, hearing us play Surfside 10,000 times every night, stopping, starting, mistakes. Must be hard for the neighbours sometime. But yeah, we finally learnt it and moved on to, I think, a Shadows Apache or something.
What was it about Surfside? Why did you pick that song over all the other instrumentals you could be playing?
Well, I'll tell you why we picked it, because one of us had the sheet music.
Okay.
That's the only reason I think it was the #1 record, but, it's not in the class of the Shadows. But we did play a lot of Shadows after that. Most of the sheet music was wrong. It's funny, and you're into music and history. You'll hear musos of my vintage say that all the sheet music, 99% of it was incorrect. Wrong chords, wrong keys, wrong notes, wrong words. But that's all you had. Like these days, you can tape it, you can hear it on Spotify, you can do whatever. But in those days, no one in those days had a tape recorder, so all you had was the sheet music, or you'd sit and listen. You'd even ring up a radio station, request it, try and find out what time they're going to play it, and then you'd sit there around the radio.
Yeah.
Oh, it does this, we'll try that again, But yeah, Surfside was pretty easy, very easy, really. Slow, just a slow instrumental. So we thought we'd give it a crack. We had the music.
The 1963 we're talking about here, that was like the year of the surf craze. I mean, did Newcastle get into it at all?
Sure.
Yeah.
Everyone played instrumentals. Surfing stuff was instrumentals, and then the Beach Boys put vocals in there. But what's funny is the Shadows who never cracked it in America, sadly. Apache was number one, here, number one in England, number one in Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, all over the world. But in America, it was covered by, I think, a Danish or Scandinavian bloke called Jørgen Ingman, and he had the hit of Apache in America. But the Shadows' first album that I've got, the record company EMI got them to release it in America, but instead of calling it The Shadows, they called it Surfing with the Shadows. But there was no surfing songs on it. But because they were instrumentals, the American company figured the only way we're going to sell this here is if we call it a surfing album. So that's what it was like. Yeah, instrumentals all had that surfing connotation.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, by the end of 1963, you find it out in the Newcastle Herald. I think it was called the Herald Sun back then or something like that.
No, there was the Herald was the daily paper, and the Sun newspaper came out every afternoon.
Oh, okay.
So almost everybody, all the guys I used to work with and parents and people, they'd buy the Herald in the morning and get the Sun in the afternoon.
So you saw this ad in the paper, the Mystics looking for a bass player, and that kind of got me thinking, like, how important was the Newcastle Herald to bands back then? Like,
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And you look at the gig guide these days, and sadly, there's a handful. In those days, there were pages of it. Yeah, things like that. Everyone put ads in the paper. We did the same thing once we started to get going, and you'd put an ad in. By then I'd started playing bass. So that first band, the Mystics, by then I was playing bass. Because I'd heard from a guy who was a drummer, Ian Host. He said, you should play bass. There's no bass players around. And it was true. There were really, hardly any bass players for some reason. So I did. I swapped the guitar for a bass, which was another cheapo rhythm beat. A rhythm beat bass. I've never seen one of those since either, but it looked all right. Wasn't brilliant, but it's all I could do at the time. And so there.
Reading your book, you mentioned the Mystics played a lot of songs by Duane Eddy, The Ventures, The Denver Men, and The Shadows. I mean, that kind of got me thinking, like, what were some of the specific songs that you were playing, like, by those artists?
I can recall a lot of them, but there were a lot of Shadows songs. Wonderful Land, Apache, Guitar Tango, Duane Eddy, Shazam, Duane Eddy, 40 Miles of Bad Road, Denver Men, Surfside. Spotniks, a Swedish group, had a few hits in Australia. They were pretty big and did a couple of theirs. But Ventures, Walk Don't Run, Perfidia, The Ninth Wave, they got into surfing stuff, being in America on the West Coast. So they did. I mean, you could make a song, a title, with instrumentals. It's really funny. With instrumentals, a title could make or break the song. If you put a nothing title to a song, an instrumental song, as against calling it Apache or Geronimo or Atlantis or Wonderful Land or, a good title. The Shadows started coming up with funny titles because they enjoyed it. There's a track of theirs called The Stars Fell on Stockton. Not Stockton here, but Stockton in northeast England. And Genie with the Light Brown Lamp. They started doing that with a lot of funny titles, Theme from a Filleted Place. But a good title, like Walk Don't Run was a good title. Pipeline, there was another huge surfing song, Pipeline by the Shantays. That was one of the first surfing songs I remember here in Australia. That was a huge hit.
Moving to some of the gigs you guys did, I've read in your book that you guys supported the Vibratones, that's featured Vince Maloney.
What a great memory you've got. Yeah, we did. Before they became the Aztecs.
Yes.
And before Billy Thorpe joined.
Yeah.
People can't believe that because Billy Thorpe is crazy. Billy Thorpe is bigger now. Some people in death, it sort of accumulates. And if you go on to, some certain Facebook and websites, Billy Thorpe is still enormous, but people absolutely love Billy Thorpe. And I did too. He was a funny bloke. And we did quite a few gigs with him. But the Vibratones, it was in the Swansea RSL Hall in a little back street. They played there because they had a Newcastle connection, Vince Maloney, and they used to practice in Cooks Hill. And so they started playing there, and then one week they weren't there, and somehow we got the gig, and we thought, oh no, we'll die here. But we got through, but it was all instrumental, but so were they. And they had a single out at the time. One track was a Shadows song, Man of Mystery, and the other song was I think it was an original called Expressway. But yeah, they were full-on instrumental band. They went to Sydney, and actually their first singer was a Newcastle guy, a Hunter Valley guy called Johnny Noble. Lovely bloke. He's still playing around the traps, I think, doing, he plays a guitar and does clubs and pubs. Lovely bloke, John. Anyway, when the Aztecs started in Sydney, he was their first singer. And then Billy Thorpe came down from Brisbane, and one night, I think it was at the old Surf City. What a place that was, Surf City in the Cross. Loved it. Anyway, one night there, or one afternoon there, they were having auditions, and Billy Thorpe stepped in and sang with the Aztecs, and they said, oh, geez, that's good. So in the end, he took over and Johnny Noble left.
You mentioned there, you're playing instrumentals. I think that was probably a very good thing because you didn't have a mic for a few months in the band.
No.
And you mentioned the great story where I think it was your rhythm guitarist had to yell out, or maybe your lead guitarist had to yell out the chords to the rhythm guitarist.
Yeah,
I think that's such a great story.
You were allowed a bit of leeway, I think, but that was crazy. The drummer we got, Paul, he came straight from being a club type drummer. So old-fashioned, he played barn dances and Pride of Errands, jazz waltzes and all that. So when he joined us, he sort of knew, oh yeah, Patchy, I know what that is. He didn't know half of the songs, but he knew them, but he didn't know what the names were. So it was funny. I can still see us at the RG Community Hall, and I'd say, now we're going to do the Shadows Shindig. And Paul would yell out to me, which one's that? How's it start? And I'd say, da-dum, da. Oh, yeah, okay. How does it finish? And the people on the dance floor, people on the dance floor hearing this, and half of them are sitting down. By the time I turn around and start playing, the dance floor's half empty.
Oh.
So, and sometimes he'd yell out, how does it end? And anyway, and then we had another guy, a rhythm guitarist, who at that stage was only learning, and wasn't super duper. And anyway, Mike, who was the best player in the band, he'd have to yell out chords to Warren. Mike would be saying, Warren, A minor, then back to C. And Paul's yelling out, how does it end? And I said to one of my mates who was there, and he used to stand along the back wall, Alistair, and I said to Alistair, hey, Al, can you hear? And he said, oh, yeah, hear it all.
May 1964, you, after 18 gigs with the Mystics, you leave for the Mystery Men, and I kind of wanted to know, how did that all come about?
Yeah, they just they were another local band. It's what it was. Half the people didn't have cars, so it was localised. Yeah. I think you went and checked all the other bands out. If one bloke had a car, you'd all jump in and say, let's go and see, the group at Warners Bay, or let's go and see this band or that band. And somehow they'd seen us and they needed a bass player. And so they came to see me, and came about by they were good friends with my sister's boyfriend, now husband. And he said, look, you're interested? They'd like you to join, but they'd like you to sing. Towards the end of the Mystics, I had started singing a few songs. The Mystics were sort of not going anywhere. One of the other guys wanted to leave, and so I said, yeah. So I joined the Mystery Men.
When you first joined the Mystery Men, were you guys playing very similar stuff to what you're playing in the Mystics at the time? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I've got an old set list from them at home too. There was only a couple of instrumentals in the set list I've got, but I can remember there was Do-Wah-Diddy, Sha-La-La, Manfred Mann, a dozen Beatles, Searchers, Kinks. So yeah, it was, a couple of Billy Thorpe songs, Ray Brown. So yeah, by then it was shifting into all vocal.
You finally got a microphone.
And they weren't good. We had to prop them up against the amplifiers because we didn't have stands for them.
Oh, wow.
And couple of times, a couple of girls would sit there and hold the mic stands, and which was dangerous, could have hit you in the teeth if they weren't careful. But very, what's the word? DIY.
In your book, you didn't really go into tue much of the Beatles 1964 World Tour, and that kind of got me thinking, like, because that happened during the month after you joined the Mystery Men.
Yep.
Why didn't you end up seeing them live? Like, what was the...
Don't mention that. That's one of the disappointments of my life. I've been to so many concerts and seen so many bands. I went down to Sydney Stadium and saw The Who, and for some reason couldn't get to the Beatles. They sold, I tell you, they sold out so quickly. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she said she would get some tickets. They were running bus trips from here. A friend of mine went down and said, do you want me to get you a ticket? And I said, no, my girlfriend's going to, and she didn't. And they were sold out 10 minutes. And so all the buses were full, and I just never got there. One of the sad things in my, people couldn't hear them for the screaming, but it would have still been lovely. I've seen Paul since, and that was the best. And I've seen Ringo since, and that was great. So that was good. But yeah, I know. I'll never get over that. Thanks, Jack.
That whole British invasions thing, I mean, did that, you mentioned in your book how a lot of disco started opening up, and so, I mean, did that really help the music scene in Newcastle, the whole British invasion
helped the music scene in the world.
Yeah.
It was a moment, like, without a doubt, you go back through Sinatra and whatever, he was huge, girls screaming, Elvis, another change, Beatles, bang. So yeah, British invasion changed the world, and then in late 60s it became more R&B. And Eric Clapton and Hendrix and that sort of stuff. But British invasion, yes, it was. It's still got a huge following. I mean, I still love it. Radio still plays so many of those tracks because they're classics, and they haven't been improved on. Beatles stuff with George Martin producing sounds like it's done today. Mm-hmm. So British invasion stuff was... It was just so, because the Beatles were so good, it made the Stones become good and the Kinks become good and the Who. So there was so many good, the Zombies, there were so many good bands. Manfred Mann, we used to do a lot of Manfred Mann songs, and they came from different places. Manfred Mann came from jazz background, whereas Clapton and these people and the Stones came from an R&B, rhythm and blues background, but quite a few of them came from a jazz background, and that's why some of them do sound different. Then there was a lot of one-hit wonders, but a lot of the one-hit wonders from the British invasion were fabulous stuff.
Yeah. Later in the year, 1964, you guys become the Tremors, as you mentioned there, and you mentioned this really interesting fact that I wasn't aware of, like, in music at the time, that you guys had to play like 50% like new music, what was new then, and then 50% older music. I mean, how did all that work for you guys? Yeah,
that's what it was.
Yeah,
fact of life. If someone rang you up with the offer of a gig, you'd say, "Is it 50-50 or what is it?" And sometimes they'd even say, "Well, yeah, but make it 70-30, 70% new." But in the early days, it really was 50-50. I've got a list from the Cardiff High School dance, the first one we did in the others before we changed our name to the Second Thoughts. And I've got a list from the dancers. High school kids, Pride of Erin, Jazz Waltz, I think, Barn Dance, some dance called Picking Up the Pawpaws. I mean, obviously a fun dance, I don't know. But you walk in and teacher hands you this. Can you play these? And you go, maybe do one of them, but some places wanted a dozen or more. Then, as the decade rolled on, the 50-50, did become like a 70-30 or an 80. And sometimes they say, look, all they want is a barn dance. If you can throw in a progressive barn dance, they'd be happy with that. That's what a lot of gigs became, rock and roll with chuck in a progressive barn dance. But in the book, I say we did this gig at Gloucester. We didn't know at the time. It turned out to be it was for their area dancing club end of year or something, championships or something. So we turned up and they give us a list. The only one we could do, I think, was the barn dance. And it was a horrible night. And we sort of got through. And the nice guy would come backstage during breaks and he'd say, right, now this one is a Valletta waltz or a Canadian three-step. Do you know that? No. And we'd say, well, okay, sing us something. And he would, and he'd dance around the little back room, and someone would say, ooh, that sounds like the Shadows shindig. So we'd say, okay, would this work? And we down. Yeah, he said, that's okay. So great. We ended up doing that, and people clapped, and we thought, great, 1 down, 19 to go. So during the night, we must have said 3 or 4 times, we've had another request for a Canadian three-step. So we'll do it. We don't normally repeat songs, but here we go. So we do Shindig again because we knew it.
We talked about how, of course, the Beatles World Tour just then, but I mean, someone that you did get to see was the Shadows at Checkers in 1965.
Yeah. At the very next table was Billy Thorpe and I think Ray Brown, and table full of models. All these wonderful looking models. And we just drove down from here on the off chance of getting in, no booking. Unless you bought a meal, they wouldn't let you in. We had no money, and all we could afford between us was a bowl of soup. So we had a bowl of soup. We all sat around with spoons, and we didn't want a meal. All we wanted to do was to go, and we didn't know you had to buy a meal. We had no money. But yeah, that was great. Shadows.
And of course, 1965 by this point when you saw that gig, I mean, that's kind of when the Mystery Men in March became the Others. And you started writing, and I wanted to bring that up because you started writing songs, I think, during this period. You wrote a song called Sometimes When I'm Alone. And I wanted to know, like, was that kind of when you started writing songs around this time?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. You know, I've written quite a lot, but we often didn't use them all. That one we did. We played that in the Others, and we actually recorded that on a local label called Vista. And we sold quite a few. And a lot of local bands in those days recorded at Vista. I've got a few, and a few different groups. They were rough and ready, sort of one track live in the studio, you know, no overdubs. I've got a lot of songs I've written, but in Newcastle, a lot of the times you had to play a lot of covers.
Yeah, I was kind of reading your book, and I thought, like, do you still have a copy of that good old EP you guys did? Yeah.
I think I've got 3 copies of it. Not that you never see it around. It only ever sold on gigs mainly, so there weren't thousands of them. But if I ever saw one, I'd pick it up, and I tried to get one for the kids.
And it was great being able to have a really good read of your book, because there's some things in there, and a few things I mentioned earlier that I hadn't really heard of before. And you mentioned a walk-off song, I had never heard of that before. Like, take me through what that was. Yeah,
a walk-off, or some people called it. I think these days, well, you don't use them, but these days it's probably more commonly called a chaser. We used to call it a walk-off, and every band had one, sometimes 2. And so when it was time for a break, you'd play your walk-off, so all the kids knew that, okay, that's a break, and they'd sit down. They'd leave the dance floor, sit down, go and buy a Coke, or run over the road to the pub. The blokes would run over the road to the Federal or wherever you're playing and get a quick beer. But yeah, so everyone had a walk-off. We used to have a couple. We did a Ventures song, and we did Shadows song, and you'd play either just the intro, just a few bars of it. Yeah, we used to do a song by the Ventures called The Ninth Wave, and we used to play a few bars of that. A lot of people would use a well-known hit, like it might have been a Beatles or Searchers with a guitar intro, and you'd just play, you know, a few bars. And but I tell you what was amazing, we played with the Twilights at Shindig Village, one of the best bands you're ever liable to see, Glenn Shorrock and Terry Britton, holy dooly. And when you're up close to them, 4 or 5-part harmonies, it was unreal. They did a different walk-off for every set, and we couldn't believe it. We thought, how good is that? But what they did was, all of their walk-offs were well-known classical pieces, and they just do da-da-da-down, like the 1812 Overture, a few bars of that. Everyone was different, so they'd learned a whole lot of different walk-offs. And we all said, we should do that rather than just have the same walk-off.
August 1966, you guys recorded with Nat Kipner. Like, what was Nat Kipner like as a producer, like working with you guys kind of thing? Yeah.
He co-wrote Surfside with Johnny Devlin, who supported the Beatles, Johnny Devlin. He was the support act. But Nat Kipner, he was great, lovely bloke, American, stayed here after the war. He was in the Pacific and stayed in Brisbane. And then, we really liked him. He was really good. And he's written a lot of songs. He co-wrote a lot of songs with Maurice Gibb, and a huge hit, Too Much, Too Little, Too Late. Johnny Mathis, he wrote that, and it was a worldwide top 10 hit. So clever man, but a great producer. He gave us some ideas and told us how to do things a bit differently. And, we didn't know much about recording. And, he was great. He had his own label, Down Under, had his own little club at the Cross called the Down Under Club for a while. We played there.
A-side, The World Keeps Going Round, B-side, Run Back Home.
Yep.
I managed to find a recording of that on YouTube, and I got to listen to it, which I was really happy about. And it sounds like might be a bit of reverb on your voice. Was there a echo chamber at all, or?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think I double-tracked it.
Yeah, I was wondering
As I recall. I double-tracked The World Keeps Going Round. I'm not sure if I double-tracked Run Back Home. I don't think so. The World Keeps Going Round was written by Ray Davies, first done by the Kinks. Great song. I love it. The other side, Run Back Home, I found on an album by Brian Poole and the Tremolos.
You guys recorded 3 songs, I think, in that session. Do you recall what the third song was?
Another Kinks song called Wonder Where My Baby Is Tonight, written and sung by Dave Davies. It was agreed when we left the studio. It was agreed by Nat that The World Keeps Going Round will be the top side, Wonder Where My Baby Is Tonight would be the flip side, and we wouldn't use Run Back Home. But when the record came out, the record company had pressed it up differently. They spelt Ray Davies' name wrong. They had Ray Davies. They had Run Back Home when it should have been Wonder Where Baby Is. But, those things happened in those days. It was a bit slapdash. Because while we were there, I think I said in the book, Nat Kipner, he was recording Spicks and Specks at the exact same time. And he used to call us in to play us what the Bee Gees had just worked on last night, which was really great. And he played us stuff by Jeff St. John, Big Time Operator and other stuff. Yeah. He was playing us tracks that they were working on. So it was only a real small 2-track studio, but he was really good.
I mean, you can hear it in some of the work he was doing. I mean, especially Spicks and Specks you mentioned there. I mean, I'm reading your book and you mentioned that it's unreleased at the time, and he goes, I'm going to show you this song Spicks and Specks, and it's. You were probably one of the first people to hear Spicks and Specks.
Yeah, we would have been. Yeah, for sure. He said, what do you think of that? And we said, that's great. He said, is it too different for the Bee Gees? We said, no, it's terrific. Yeah. It was a huge leap, that song. I mean, the Bee Gees were always great. I always loved them. They're always great, but Spicks and Specks was so different. And, it just sort of jumped out.
And, of course, you mentioned in your book too, Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds, which I've talked about quite a few times on this show. I mean, and it kind of got me thinking, like, what was the importance of that contest to the Newcastle music scene specifically?
It was huge. It was a funny thing. Like I think I said in the book, we in the end decided we wouldn't go in anymore. A couple of times the radio stations used to run it, and the radio stations almost took it in turn. Like it wasn't always the same radio station. And in the end, after a couple of years, they used to say to us, will you come and play when it's finished and the judges are deliberating? And they would pay us really good money for a half an hour spot. Yeah. So in the end, we thought, well, why not do this, take the money and not worry about going in the competition? Because depending who the judges were, sometimes you'd think, we should have won that. All the other musos would say to us, you guys will win. That was really great. And you wouldn't. And it would depend on who the judges were. So sometimes we would have sworn we'd win and we didn't. Other times we thought we didn't go that well and we'd win. And that's what a lot of bands found. It was a bit hit and miss. Could have been 20 bands go in the Newcastle. And then all those 20 bands would go to Taree.
Yeah, okay.
And 2RE up there ran it. And so you'd have the same bands and you'd see your mates in the other bands and you'd say, what are you playing? Same again? Yeah, same again. Or if you didn't think you went crash hot, you'd change the songs, or sometimes you'd try and find out who the judges were. I can remember someone saying, that bloke likes jazzy stuff. So I think I said in the book, next year we're looking for more variety and different styles. So we learnt a bit of Dave Brubeck's classic jazz instrumental Take 5. And it's in a time signature of 5/4. It's not 4/4 rock and roll, it's 5/4. And we learnt that, and we learnt a medley of that, and I learnt She Loves You in German phonetically. Du glaubst, sie liebt mich. Anyway, so off the Beatles record, the Beatles recorded it, as you would know, in German. I learnt it phonetically and had it spot on, went to a lot of trouble, and we played She Loves You in German. The other bands in the crowd were knocked out, and then we did a little bit of Take 5, just thrown on the end, and I think we came third. So we said, next year, if they offer us money to play at the break, let's do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Taree thing was sitting out, I still remember it like it was yesterday, sitting out on the steps, and someone said, they want you on the stage, you've won. And we thought, oh, okay, that's all right, that's good. So we were over the moon, so we jumped in, went up the back steps, and there's the radio announcers on the mics, and we walked on the back steps. They said, yes, the Second Thoughts. And so we're, and we were all patting the radio station blokes on the back, and they were shaking our hands, and we were jumping up and down. Crowd was applauding. And he said, and now, second prize, second place. And he introduced the second place, and they came up. We congratulated them because we were still on stage, and hit them around the head with these big plastic polywaffles and stuff. And we were really, really good winners, you know. And we're all, then us and the other band who came second were all jumping around. And finally, in first place, I said to Graham, did he say first? And Graham said, yeah, I'm sure he did. Tonight's winners. So we'd come third.
Oh, no.
thinking we'd won. As someone said to me in the crowd, said, geez, you guys were good. I thought you'd be disappointed about coming third. You guys took it really well. And I said, that's the way we are. When you read about the big national bands, like I can remember I was reading about Glenn Wheatley when he was in the Masters Apprentices, and they didn't know whether to go in it or not, because if you're a big band and you don't win, it looked bad for you, and it was bad PR. So some bands didn't go in thinking, that's what we thought. We won't go in. If they offer us money to play while the judges are deliberating, we'll do that. But having said that, the first few years, we always went in, and but it was good fun. And the Newcastle there was so much good camaraderie between the bands in those days. Yes, it was competitive, but if someone didn't have an amp or a guitar, we'd lend each other, or sometimes they'd say, look, our bass player hasn't turned up. Could you come and play with us? And I'd go and do that. And, you know, we'd be the same. A few times our drummer couldn't make it, and different drummers. So the scene was really great and friendly. You know, sure, you were trying to get more work than the other bands, but it was really friendly, and the camaraderie was really great.
In 69 now, I mean, that's kind of when the Second Thoughts kind of formed into Bittersweet. Am I right on that? Was it more like that formed into that? Or?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. For a little while, I was just singing and not playing bass. And then a couple of the guys in Second Thoughts and I and a couple of other people formed Bittersweet. The lead guitarist in the Second Thoughts, Graham Conlon, was asked to join Normie Rowe's band. Mm-hmm. So he went and joined Normie Rowe, and he had a great career in music. And so that's how that happened, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned this in your book too. I mean, 20-minute guitar solos were pretty popular, like with prog rock and all that at the time. I mean, was that the kind of stuff you guys were doing, or like?
No, No, we didn't necessarily do many of those. But you're right. In late 60s, prog rock, you know, long solos and people sitting down, not dancing.
Yeah.
It was a different sort of scene, and. Do you like prog rock? I love prog rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I like a lot of... I recently worked all my way through all my Genesis albums.
Oh, yeah.
I've got every Genesis album. And it's headphone stuff because it's so good.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And you listen to all the playing, and people may say what they like about Phil Collins, but what a drummer. Genesis were... But there's a lot of good prog rock. But yeah, that's what happened in the late 60s, early 70s. A lot of it was sit down. Kids didn't dance. It wasn't cool to dance for a while, and, but there was some good, like Spectrum.
Yeah, I was just about to mention them. Yeah.
Love Spectrum. Yeah, they were great.
And I read in your book, and I was stunned at this, that Bittersweet, they'd only been around for a couple of weeks, and you get to support the Easy Beats. I mean... Yeah.
It was unbelievable. I was so happy to do it. It wasn't the Easy Beats at their best.
Yeah.
Next time I saw them, they were really good, which was the last tour they did. This is when they first came back from England, and I think I said in the book, I spent a fair bit of time talking to them, and I couldn't believe that someone who'd just done Friday My Mind could be broke. They were broke, and they had no money, and they were just doing this tour to try and get some money. And the scene had changed a little. They'd gone back to doing a lot of their early hard stuff, thinking that's what we did before we left Australia, and we'll do all the hard rocky stuff. But it had gone proggy while they were away. Yeah. And a lot of people, they didn't really want to be doing the tour, and the band was falling apart and did fall apart straight after it. But I was so happy to do it. It was just a weird night. It was at the old Newcastle Broadmeadow basketball stadium, which is still there. They had the Affair with Kerry Bedell. She was great. And us and about 3 other local bands. They asked us to finish the night, which was, go on after the Easy Beats. I didn't want to do that, but they had a fashion parade in the middle of the night. People were drifting away by the time they put the fashion parade on, I think, after the Easy Beats, and kids were going, they didn't want a fashion parade,
Yeah.
So it was just too strange. Like the Affair were a really good band, but it was too disjointed. But next time I saw the Easy Beats in town at the Palais, they were good.
I read in the foreword to your book, Hey Rock and Roll, Art Ryan says, history is lost because most of us don't believe anyone is interested in our life. And I mean, kind of got me thinking, did you ever feel like that about your story, or did you always want to write a book? Or like?
No, I didn't. I hadn't thought about that. It's funny, in the book, okay, I say a little bit about where I came from at the start of the book, but it's not a total autobiography, because I could have written a heap more about funny things that happened away from music. Over the years, people have said to me, when they'd ask me a question about the Easy Beats or Billy Thorpe or whoever, and they said, you should write a book. There's a lot of, if I did an interview in the paper or something, they'd say, you should write a book. There's a lot of good So it was always way in the back of my mind, but only connected with music.
I mean, we talked about this last time about your book, but I've got to mention it again. It's a beautiful package. It's not just another book. It's, it's colourful, it's glossy, full of pictures. I mean, was that always the idea?
Thanks, Jack. It's lovely of you to say that. It has been really well received, and I'm pleased to say. What I like is if I'm talking about Billy Thorpe, a picture of Billy Thorpe should be next to where you're talking about it. Sometimes most books just have, 12 glossy pages in the middle with all of the photos. But I wanted to get them next to where I was talking about them. So if I was talking about Benny and the Jets, that's where I wanted to put the photos. So, and with the graphic artist that I was working with, she could do that. So it was great.
Kind of gets me thinking, for those that want to find your book, Hey Rock and Roll, I mean, where is it available? Where can we get it?
Thanks, Jack. Lovely of you. Actually, in Newcastle, it's in Harry Hartog's at Katara and East Maitland, and in certain newsagents, but not all. But Harry Hartog's bookshops, it's in both. You'd find me on Facebook, or if you needed to. I post a few around the country, posted one the other day, and it's still chugging along nicely, so that's good.
I want to thank you again, Rick, for making the time to talk with me again.
Jack, it's a pleasure, and thanks so much.
That was Rick Pointon, Newcastle music legend and author of Hey Rock and Roll. To get a copy of Rick's book, you can find it in most local news agencies, or alternatively, you can message Rick direct on Facebook. Tune in a fortnight for the third instalment in our Newcastle Vinyl Vibe series when I talk with Les Hall, guitarist of the Velvet Underground. Remember to share this show with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed what you heard today, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Vinyl Vibes, and to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.